Hello everyone, I know you watched this video to accompany you to sleep. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, don't forget to tell me where you are from and what time you watched this video. Let's jump straight into the story. Now we're going back to 2014, to Indianapolis, the most populated city in the state of Indiana. Busy and bustling all the time, and home to almost 900,000 people, two of which were 24-year-old Nathan Benjamin Trapazzano and his wife, Jennifer. Nathan was from a big and close family, being the fourth of 5 children. And his brother said even though Nathan was younger than him, he looked up to him so much. Nathan had always excelled in academics, music, and athletics. He had a black belt in karate and played piano and violin as well. He was witty and clever, but always remained humble and gracious. He gained a place at Ball State University, where he was working on getting a degree in Latin, Greek, and classical studies. And it was here that he met his future wife, Jennifer, who was training to be a nurse. The pair were inseparable and had a lot in common, both sharing the same morals and values and very strong in their Catholic faith. Jennifer said she loved his quirkiness and how smart he was, always making her laugh and challenging her to push herself in every aspect of her life. The couple eventually moved to Indianapolis, where Nathan got a job as a computer programmer at Ivy Tech Community College. Jennifer was still doing her training when they both found out they were going to be parents. They were over the moon when they discovered they were having a little girl, and they knew her name right away, Cecilia Marie. Flash forward a few months, it was now coming to the end of March 2014, and Nathan and Jennifer were busy planning. They had a lot of exciting and special days coming up. Cecilia was due in just a few weeks. Their first wedding anniversary was on May 11th, and a week after this was Nathan's 25th birthday. Safe to say there was a lot going on for the young couple, but nothing was more exciting for Nathan than becoming a father. He couldn't wait to meet his daughter. On the 1st of April, 2014, Nathan was up early as normal. Having always been really active, he made sure he got a long walk or a run in every day. He normally worked out in the evenings, but he had recently decided to change up his routine, so he could be at home with Jennifer more after he finished work and before bed. Just before 5 a.m., Nathan was getting ready for an hour-long morning walk around the block before the sun rose. Nothing out of the ordinary, just the routes he always took past the shops he normally walked by, on the roads he knew very well. He grabbed his old MP3 player, his headphones and his rosary beads, and quietly left Jennifer asleep. At 5:50 a.m., a resident just a short walk away heard a loud popping sound. She looked out of her window to see Nathan collapsing to the ground and shouting for help. She called 911 and ran outside. She said as she got to Nathan, she could see he was only wearing his joggers. He had no shoes and no shirt on. They were just scattered around on the ground. She could see a small bullet wound in his stomach, but noticed there wasn't much blood at this point. Nathan was clearly in shock, but was still conscious and seemed to be fairly alert. However, 5 minutes later, as the ambulance and police arrived on the streets, Nathan's condition started to rapidly deteriorate. He was no longer able to talk, couldn't tell the officers anything, and was gasping for air. They managed to stabilize him, and he was rushed to hospital and straight into emergency surgery. Just after 7 a.m., Jennifer woke up, confused that her husband still wasn't home yet and getting ready for work. His phone was still on the kitchen table, but this wasn't unusual as he made sure not to take anything valuable out with him. She grabbed her coat and started walking the route he normally took, trying to calm herself down, but deep down knowing something was really wrong. Despite the best efforts of the doctors and surgeons, at 7:40 a.m., 24-year-old Nathan Trapazzano died. Jennifer, who was still out walking, turned a corner and saw the yellow tape everywhere and police flooding the street. She hurried over, telling them her husband had left for a walk and not come home, and this was right in the middle of his route. But all they could tell her was that there had been an incident. At this point, they didn't know who the victim was as he had no idea on him, so they couldn't give Jennifer any more details. Anxiously, she showed them a picture of Nathan on her phone, asking if this was what he looked like. Officers knew it was the same person, and quietly escorted her to one of the police cars to sit her down and tell her the devastating news. Jennifer, just 5 weeks away from her due date, would then learn that the love of her life was gone. One detective said he had his whole life in front of him, never been in trouble before, never been a problem, was minding his own business, doing what anybody in our community should be able to do, and that is to take a morning walk. Near to where he was found were some shell casings, which matched a .40 caliber gun. Something officers said was an unusual size, and not one they saw a lot. The owner of the tire shop, Jesse, knew Nathan well, and saw him walk past every day, giving him a little wave as he did. After being broken into just a couple of months before, fortunately for the police, he had installed security cameras which backed onto the parking lot where Nathan was found. The footage was very grainy and blurry, but it had captured everything. Nathan could be seen power walking down the road, being followed by someone, who later broke into a run to keep up with him. Later on in the clip, police noticed a second person turn up, who appeared to be working with the shooter. The second half of the CCTV, for obvious reasons, has only ever been partially released. At one point, it looked as if Nathan was raising his hands, as if to show he was complying and would do whatever they wanted him to. But the pair backed him into the parking lot, and Nathan was shot. After Nathan was down, they ran away down the main road. What you're going to see here in a second, coming from up in this area, is the victim, all right. And then a short time later, you'll see one suspect, and then a second suspect. Really want people that are driving down the street at this time. Something, jogs their memory. There comes the suspect, now running toward the victim. Here comes suspect number 2, who acted as the lookout. Now his hands are out. He's being told something. They'll chat around this side by the street over here, closer to the right side of the screen. And at some point, the victim and suspect number 1 will go over to this general area where they'll go off screen. That's where a struggle will occur and the victim is shot. Second suspect is acting as a lookout. Will take off running while they're struggling. Northeast towards 16th Street, and then north across 16th Street into the neighborhood. Suspect number 1, and the shooter runs off west onto 16th Street. The only witness they had was the woman who had called 911. But by the time she got out there, they were long gone. Things were made even harder when the police started interviewing the residents of the area. They all said that, sadly, this was not an uncommon thing to happen. Over the years, their area had gotten so much worse in terms of gun violence, with multiple shootings happening. Someone said there had been a disturbing amount of shootings and murders in the last few months alone. He was going to be a dad. He was excited and happy, and he was going to be a great dad. Seemed like he was moving faster in life. Like even, 3 of us are older than him, and he was, moving faster than all of us pretty much. I don't know, he's kind of devastated all around, but I know he'll still be around. Not, physically, but, some ways he'll listen to me still when I need him. And I guess that's all I can really ask for. He had his hands up. One theory the police had was that it was some kind of gang initiation, but another potential motive, and one they believed was more likely, was that it was a failed attempt at a robbery. Nathan's family said this made it even more senseless, as he made it a point to never go out walking with any money, cards, or his phone. The footage was sent to experts, and was able to be enhanced just enough for them to work out the clothing the shooter had on. But apart from that, there was nothing. Still developing story tonight. A 24-year-old married man and soon-to-be father was gunned down early Tuesday while walking not far from his home. An IMPD has set up this mobile command post near the scene of this crime to track down the men that they believe are responsible for this murder. And tonight, family and friends are trying to deal with this senseless crime. This surveillance video shows what people across the nation now know about 24-year-old Nathan Tropicano. But to think that he was simply a victim of a senseless crime would be wrong, say his family and friends. He just seemed like one of those guys that I wanted to be like as I was going through college. Brandon Stanley, a senior at Ball State, met Nathan 4 years ago at the university. The two men reconnected as members of Holy Rosary Church. Brandon describes his friend as having a deep faith. When the shooting happened, he was out praying a morning rosary. So he was out doing his morning routine, where he would go jogging or go walking and pray at the same time. And then this happened. Black and white surveillance video of the last moments of his life. And while Nathan Tropicano's life ended tragically, his friends and family say the real tragedy is to let his death define him. A week after Nathan had been killed, police finally made a break in the case. As they started looking into any of the shootings in the area around the same time, it came to light that just 18 hours after Nathan had died, a 16-year-old called Simeon Raheem Adams, who went by the nickname Red, was taken to hospital in a critical condition with a gunshot wound to the neck. He had shot 3 bullets at a man named Eric, who had fired back at him in self-defense. Simeon was also a suspect in the burglary of a gunshot, a week earlier at about 2 a.m., in which 30 firearms were stolen, and at 3 a.m. on April 1st, just 2 hours before Nathan was shot. He and 2 other men had attempted to steal a car from outside of a strip club, stopped only from doing so when the bouncer caught them. The strip club was less than a mile away from where Nathan had been walking, showing both the shooter and whoever was on lookout in the same clothing. When detectives heard about this, they knew they had to interview Simeon. He was not only confirmed as being in the same location of Nathan's shooting at the same time, he was now also facing arrest for the attempted murder of someone else. And some guns that had been stolen from the shop matched the casings found near Nathan's body. But being in the condition he was in hospital meant they had to reach out to the people in his inner circle first. The more detectives talked to people, the more they kept hearing the nickname Red floating about, linking him to numerous incidents and crimes around the area, and people he knew were picking him out of every picture lineup they showed. Martez McGraw was Simeon's cousin, and he agreed to talk. When he was shown the CCTV footage from outside of the tire shop, he immediately confirmed it was his cousin. He even admitted to being there himself for part of the morning, and confirmed all of Simeon's steps and movements. The other man on the tape was identified and interviewed. After this, police ruled everyone apart from Simeon out when it came to Nathan's murder. This was the person they wanted. Martez told police Simeon ran up to Nathan and ordered him to stop. Simeon then made him walk between the tire shop and the strip club. He made him strip by telling him to take off his shirt. He put his hands in the air, and Simeon shot him. Another man also told police he was woken up early on April 1st by Simeon banging on his door. He said he was out of breath, telling him the police were looking for him, because he had got into what he referred to as a tussle with someone and shot them. Although doctors were initially skeptical that Simeon would survive, he did, and was finally well enough for the police to talk to him. They presented him with everything they knew, and the 16-year-old was subsequently placed under arrest. He would soon be charged as an adult with murder, attempted robbery, and carrying a handgun without a license. Well, we begin tonight with the story behind the teenager charged with the brutal and senseless murder of Nathan Tropicano. That 16-year-old Simeon Adams goes to court tomorrow morning facing serious violent felonies in 2 separate shootings. 2 days before the murder, Adams allegedly got into an altercation with a man at the steak and lemonade shop at 29th and MLK. It began when Adams bumped into the victim, then glared at him, and then shot him. My heart and my prayers went out to him, because it could have been me. It could have been 2 murders. I still feel sad about it. I'm just glad he off the streets. Over the past 6 years, juvenile prosecutors charged Adams with 29 serious and violent crimes, for which he only spent 50 days behind bars. Mr. Adams has been charged with murder, felony murder, attempt robbery, and carrying a handgun without a license. We have provided to you copies of the probable cause affidavit on both those matters. I'll not go into any great detail in terms of the allegations, but in a nutshell, as you're well aware, there was a surveillance video from a nearby business relating to this particular crime. And in the video, one of the suspects had relatively distinctive clothing wearing. It is also set forth that statements have been given by witnesses implicating Mr. Adams in the shooting. He was known to the street element. And in some cases, as we talk about those cases with young people who find themselves in harm's way, you often become the victim of the very crimes you commit. We're clear about the message we're sending. We're going to make the city safe. We're going to continue to call on the citizens and the media to help us bring back information. And we're going to thank the prosecutor and his fine team for making sure these cases are brought to justice. Upon hearing that a 16-year-old had been arrested, Jennifer posted to Facebook and said, "I don't know this man's circumstances, but it hurts to hear such a young man could turn to such violence." She asked people to pray for Simeon, and Nathan's family and friends all agreed that Nathan would have forgiven him. Nathan Tropicano was finally laid to rest with hundreds in attendance. The investigating officers all showed up, too, saying what had happened to him had really struck a nerve with them, and that this was a case they would remember for the rest of their lives. And a couple of weeks later, Jennifer gave birth to the couple's daughter, Cecilia Marie, a welcome burst of happiness in such a dark period of time for everyone. Their family said she looked so much like Nathan and was a wonderful, happy, and smiley little girl. As the court proceedings got underway, someone else would gain some attention. Court documents showed that the 16-year-old was free to walk the streets for a month while awaiting a hearing on 13 probation violations. The probation officer had visited his home, but on 9 occasions, Simeon was nowhere to be found. After the 3rd violation, The officer could have asked for an arrest warrant, but for reasons unknown, he didn't. The judge said of this, "I expressed my extreme concern to probation about the handling of this case. When I saw there had been 9 house arrest violations, I was very concerned and upset." The probation officer in question would soon resign. Even though he was now 18, and despite being charged as an adult, because he was 16 at the time of the murder, prosecutors knew it would have been nearly impossible to get a life in prison sentence for Simeon. However, he was facing 45 to 65 years if found guilty by a jury. In the courtroom, a handful of family members showed up today to hear the formal murder and other felony charges against Adams. "I'm a cousin, and he is innocent and sentencing guilty." And though police initially identified a second suspect in surveillance video from the murder scene on West 16th Street, second suspect is acting as a lookout. Only Adams faces charges. Prosecutors know who the second person is, another 16-year-old. They've declined to file charges against him, and because they want to use him at the trial of Mr. Adams. Criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Jack Crawford says even though the second teen was feet away when the murder took place, prosecutors likely have decided to use him as a key witness rather than charge him with a crime, and so clearly he knows who he's talking about, and he was 9 feet away. So if he's telling the truth, mind you, if he's telling the truth, then he's a very important witness for the state. In 2015, just over a year after Nathan had died, Simeon Adams pleaded guilty to murder. Simeon's legal team and friends and family commented on his troubled childhood and adolescence. Losing his mother to drowning when he was just 13 months old, his dad being in and out of prison for years, he had run-ins with the police that had started at the age of just 10 years old. His uncle who had helped raise him said, "He used to get into trouble, but I didn't think he was capable of this. I used to try to tell him not to hang with the wrong people and to stay on the right path. He listened to me. I would try to keep him in line, and I told him to do something, he would do it. I would speak to his friends and tell them that if they didn't get themselves together, they would end up dead or in jail. I can't believe he would get involved in something like this." He was frequently shown coming in and out of court laughing, and when it came time for his sentencing, little had changed. The judge addressed him directly, asking him if he appreciated the impact of his actions on the Trapezzano family. He bluntly said, "No ma'am, and nothing else after this." The teenager who admitted to killing an Indianapolis newly wedded father-to-be will spend decades in prison. A Marion County judge sentenced 18-year-old Simeon Adams to 55 years for killing Nathan Trapezzano. As part of the plea deal, his potential sentence was reduced, and he was handed down 55 years in prison. Under Indiana law, Simeon could be eligible for parole after 27 years, based on credit for good behavior and time already served. If this happens, he will be 45 years old. He was later given a further 12 years in prison in connection with the shooting of Eric, which put him in hospital in the first place. This 12 years is to be served consecutively. The loss of Nathan had a big impact. Everybody rallied behind Jennifer, and a GoFundMe was set up to support her, Cecilia, and his family. It reached over $170,000 in donations. Jennifer showed immense strength and motivation to carry on as she would have. And just a year after she lost Nathan, she finished grad school with honors, and is now a physician's assistant. The Nathan Trapezzano Memorial Foundation was also set up, and their mission is to offer support and financial relief to children who have lost a parent. They do what they call the Nate Walk, a 5-kilometer walk just as he loved to do, which doubles as a fundraising event. These walks are held once a year in Indiana, in Indianapolis and Pennsylvania, and people can also participate virtually. Ivy Tech Community College, where Nathan worked, said it would grant a full 2-year scholarship to Cecilia if she ever wanted it. This is Miss Celia Marie Trapezzano. She's about to turn 1. It's completely changed my world. I mean, April 1st did in one way, and having a daughter did in another. I think any mom could say that. You are now. You have someone dependent on you. You can't just be selfish. You have to give your life to them. And I didn't know how much, and I still don't know how much I have to give sometimes. I feel like my energy is not always there and my heart's still broken, but I give her so much love and as much love as I can. And she's my joy. And there's times where I'm sad because Nate's not there to be with us, but I know he's watching over us and I know he wouldn't want me to be sad. Jennifer said time almost stands still and passes quicker than she can keep up with it. Whenever she doubts herself or has a difficult day with Cecilia, she asks Nathan for advice. She said, "I have a voicemail from him on March 31st, 2014. I've listened to it over and over and over again. His voice sounds so familiar, still like it was yesterday. I miss him. I miss everything about him. In so many ways, it feels like he has only been gone for 10 seconds, and yet it feels like 100 years. Story 2. These are amongst the very worst crimes which have come before the High Court of Justiciary. This is probably one of the most horrific cases that I and my team have been involved in. The National Crime Agency described this as a once-in-a-generation crime, and I sincerely hope that no one else sees this ever again. 25-year-old Benelin Aquino was originally from the Philippines. She was incredibly popular, down to earth and much loved, with her sister Shella saying she didn't know anybody who disliked her. Benelin had been keen to pursue her education, and Shella had worked to support her while she went to school, as did their father, Benedicto. The family came together to help her and ensure that she graduated. She was described as intelligent, kind, beautiful, and dependable. She cared deeply for her family, and her brother said she would protect him from bullies. In 2015, she met a British man called Lexington Burke on a dating website. A romance blossomed, and after going out to the Philippines, the pair were married in a big wedding in Samar on July 28, 2018. 1 month later, on August 19th, they welcomed their first child, a little girl called Jellica. On Jellica's first birthday, the family would relocate to the United Kingdom. It was the first time Benelin had left the Philippines, and she was hopeful that there would be a bright future ahead of her in the UK. She worked hard in the UK and sent money back to her family in the Philippines to support them. Sadly, by the end of 2020, the marriage had started to fall apart and Benelin moved into emergency accommodation, a first-floor flat in Kingswood, 3 miles outside of Bristol. She made friends in her sheltered accommodation, like the Mums and Bath group, who helped her by giving her food and other goods. Members of the group would visit her, as would her friends in Bristol, with people keen to show and give her as much support and love as possible. Even though their marriage had broken down, the couple had agreed to custody arrangements for Jellica. Towards the end of February 2021, Lexington had made several attempts to contact Benelin, but he got no response. She wasn't replying to his text messages or answering his calls. He had posted a note through her letterbox, but this too had gone unanswered. The social work department had also contacted him to see if he had heard from her, as they had been unable to reach her and she had missed an appointment. This was totally out of character, and as he reached a point of extreme concern, he contacted the police, and Benelin and Jellica and another child, who was 7 years old, were reported missing on the 1st of March. It's important to note here that information on this case refers to this 7-year-old girl, but other news sources would later state that this was Benelin's eldest daughter. No name or information has been given as she cannot be legally identified, and all steps must be taken to protect her identity. She will be referred to throughout this episode as Jane Doe. Avon and Somerset police launched an investigation and quickly uncovered a lead. A car had been traced driving into Gloucestershire around the time they had last been seen before being driven back up north and over the border into Scotland. The driver was seen on CCTV filling up his car in a petrol station. The investigators reached out to the Scottish police for their assistance in finding the vehicle. The car was registered to a man called Andrew Innes, who had traveled down from Dundee to pick them up. Despite the time zone difference between the Philippines and the United Kingdom, Shella and Benelin always found time to talk to each other and were in regular contact. Before the three of them had gone missing on Thursday, February 18th, Benelin had been talking to her sister on a video call. Benelin was in Andrew's car, and they were all driving up to Scotland. Shella asked if she could see him, and Benelin flipped the camera around and showed the man driving the car. There were no overnight bags. It was clear that this was not meant to be a long trip. A couple of days after she had arrived in Scotland, Shella had become concerned as Benelin was no longer replying to her messages. On Saturday, February 20th, she sent Andrew 2 messages knowing that Benelin was with him. "Hi, hello, sir. What happened to my sister?" The following day, she received a reply. "It's a little bit long story, but don't worry, she's perfectly fine." Shella messaged back, "What happened to my sister, sir? Please tell me." Andrew responded, "I met her on a dating website, and we chatted for a long time. Then I went down to visit her." "Where is she now?" Shella asked. "She's in Glasgow. She didn't tell me her whole story before. I only found out last weekend. I thought she was divorced already. But it seems she wasn't 100% honest with me about that. He said he had dropped them at a cafe in Glasgow with another man she had met online, someone that he didn't know. He said that Ben Allen had wanted to hide away at his property, as Lexington wanted custody of Jellica and wanted Ben Allen thrown out of the country. He told Shella that Ben Allen was safe, and that he had advised her to discard her phone if she wanted to get away from the authorities. Shella begged to speak with Ben Allen. He replied, "I expect she will get in touch with you once she gets settled down." Several more messages went back and forth. Shella said, "Sir, can you tell me my sister is alive?" Andrew replied, "Scotland is a very peaceful country. We don't have much crime at all. Please try not to worry. I'm sure your sister is perfectly safe." 4 days later, Shella had reached out to him again. He told her that the other gentleman from the cafe had messaged him to say they were settling into their new routine very well, adding she's happy to have found someone nice and desperately relieved that her baby won't be taken away from her. Andrew said he wished to draw a line under this, and said that he would wipe his technology, not just to protect myself, but also to protect her, so the police can't find her if they search my house. Shella had asked him to send a video of Ben Allen to prove that she was safe, and he sent her one. She said, "I hope we can chat again, sir." He messaged back, "Maybe one day we can once the dust has all settled." The video he had sent of her to Shella was an old one. At 3:20 p.m. on the 5th of March, police officers were dispatched to 21 Trewine Avenue. This was the address the car had been registered to, home to 50-year-old Andrew Innes. The car was parked outside, and there was also a skip containing various items, including mattresses and debris. After knocking on the door, Andrew Innes opened it, but only slightly, and they spoke to him on the doorstep. He refused to allow the officers into his house, saying that he was self-isolating and his daughter had just come out of the bath and needed to put some clothes on. The officers saw Jane Doe, who was fully clothed, inside the house through a crack in the door. They had a bad feeling and knew something was wrong. They insisted he let them inside. Upon entering the house, they described it as being in a state of disarray. It was seemingly under renovation. Kitchen utensils were on the stairs, and the cooker and units in the kitchen had all been removed. In the living room was Jane Doe, who was watching cartoons. One of the officers spoke to her. She confirmed that Andrew was not her father, and they were of no relation to each other. When questioned, Andrew Innes said he had driven Benny Lynn and Jellica to Glasgow, and left them at a cafe with a man he didn't know. He said he hadn't seen them since. They didn't believe the story he was telling, and they knew they needed to dig deeper for the truth. What came out of his mouth next would leave the officers stunned. "I killed her. She's under the floor. We got into a fight, and I killed her. But where was Jellica?" "Under the floor with her mom. I couldn't look after a child. The child was screaming," he said. Upon this shocking confession, Andrew Innes was arrested and taken into custody. Jane Doe was also taken away to safety. The following day, on the 6th of March, he was charged with the murder of Benny Lynn and Jellica, and the police now needed to find their bodies. When news of the appalling crime began to break and spread, the local residents left flowers and toys in tribute to Benny Lynn and Jellica outside of Trewine Avenue. As the hunt for the bodies continued, the police began to piece together the chain of events. Benny Lynn had been using a dating website called Filipino Cupid as she was seeking companionship. It was here that she met 50-year-old Andrew Innes. The messages had initially just been general chit-chat and had then moved into video calls. He started to steer the conversation in a different direction. He asked her to send a photograph of herself that was sexual in nature, but she refused. He offered her a job as a community relations manager and money to work for him. He would also give her somewhere to stay, to which she replied, "If you want to employ me, I can do this in Bristol." On the 12th of February, the pair had agreed to meet up. After they had arranged the meeting, Andrew Innes had made several internet searches for the murder rates in Scotland, as well as what is chloroform used for and underfloor storage. In spite of the strict travel restrictions that were in place due to COVID-19, he had traveled down from Dundee to England to meet her in Kingswood, a distance of more than 400 miles. She had taken pity on him sleeping in his car as he couldn't get into a hotel, and he wasn't allowed to stay in her accommodation. She had wanted to see Scotland and the beauty it had to offer, so she agreed to go with him and stay at his for the weekend. Various photographs were taken of Benny Lynn and Jellica in Dundee, as they saw the sights and explored the city, as well as photographs of Andrew Innes. On the 23rd of February, he was seen purchasing gravel and DIY tools, and the next day, a skip turned up at the house. The task in front of the officers was massive. They called upon the assistance of forensics teams alongside anthropologists, archaeologists, and geologists to ascertain if what he was saying had actually been true. It would take 2 weeks for the police to excavate the house, but they would come to discover that Andrew Innes had not been lying. Buried roughly 3 feet down, the bodies of Angelica and Benny Lynn were found on March 19th. Back in the Philippines, Shala received a call. It was from Benny Lynn's estranged husband, Lexington. She could not believe what she was hearing, and she was tasked with giving the news to her parents. We're living in a different part of the country. Completely traumatized by the death of her sister and niece, she was left unable to sleep and kept trying to contact Benny Lynn on Messenger. Benny Lynn's devastated brother posted to social media as the police continued to look into Andrew Innes. They discovered that this software developer had no previous criminal convictions. He had been born in Germany on a military base in 1970. He had moved to Dundee from Derby at the age of 24 and had worked with DMA Design on various video games after attending the University of Aberdeen. He would later marry a woman from Japan and moved out there with her. The couple shared 3 children and also lived in California for a while before going back to Scotland once more. In 2019 their marriage had fallen apart and he had been deported from Japan back to the UK, away from his wife and children. Andrew Innes was on 34 dating websites, and there were more disturbing discoveries. He was very experienced with technology and designed and built what was referred to as a scraper tool that could be bolted onto various websites. This meant he could only have women with young children included in the searches he was making on these sites. He harvested the data and put it into a spreadsheet where women were graded based on age, weight, height, and whether or not they were mothers to young children. The profiles he had given the highest scores to were women with young children who were in their mid to late 20s. Now that the bodies of Benny Lynn and Angelica were found, it was time for a post-mortem to be carried out. This would reveal the horrifying truth. Benny Lynn suffered major head injuries and internal bleeding. She had also been stabbed in the chest. It is believed she was murdered on the 23rd of February, the same day he was seen on CCTV buying DIY tools and gravel. Detective Constable Paul Hardy asked Innes how long she had been buried under the floor. Innes replied, "Last Friday she came up. We were going to spend the weekend together. I saw she had been chatting to about 50 men on the phone. It was either Monday or Tuesday. It took me a while to get through the concrete." He was adamant it hadn't been planned though. He said, "There was a fight and she came at me and I fought back and now she's dead. There was no premeditation. She came at me with a sushi knife." But CCTV would blow this story apart, as he was shown in a B&Q hardware store on King's Cross Road in Dundee. He purchased the hammer that he would use to bludgeon her to death. He said that he had killed her in self-defense, fearing for his life, but his story would later change, saying he had suffered an auditory hallucination. It is believed that this is how Benny Lynn's death had actually occurred. As she stood in the kitchen making food, he attacked her, bludgeoning her repeatedly in the head with the hammer. He then went to his office to get a long-bladed knife that Innes had described as a samurai sword, before heading back into the kitchen and stabbing her with it. He had also bludgeoned her with the handle of the blade, and again with the hammer. All of this had happened in front of 7-year-old Jane Doe. He proceeded to wrap up her dead body in a rubble sack, tarpaulin, and a blanket, before putting her under the kitchen floor. Following the murder of Benny Lynn, over the next 2 to 3 days, he had kept Angelica alive and sexually abused her. He would then murder her by applying pressure to her neck and mouth. He wrapped up her naked body in rubble sacks and put her with her mother under the kitchen floor. He said that she had wanted her mother, and it seemed logical to me to put her with her mom. His DNA was also found on her body, and DNA belonging to both Angelica and Innes was found on a condom in a bin at the house. Following the murders, he had told Jane Doe that Benny Lynn and Angelica were in hospital, and that was why they weren't there. Officers who interviewed him said he was wallowing in self-pity and showed no remorse for his dreadful crimes. The investigator spoke to Jane Doe. She explained that Andrew Innes had what she called a heavy hammer, and that he had put it in Benny Lynn's head. She said, "I tried to call the police. I couldn't speak." She said they had been playing a game of hide and seek when Angelica was murdered by Innes. She said, "I don't know where, I just know looking in the bathroom, and he shut the door on me. Andrew shut the door at me, so it must be in the bathroom. I should have saved them, but I couldn't because I didn't know what was happening." During her time at the house, she was subjected to an appalling series of rape sexual assaults. She said that after the assaults, where she would be handcuffed and gagged, he would give her money, on one occasion giving her £2 and 10 pence. She described being held captive by him. "Andrew put a rope on the door and attached it to the other door, and I couldn't open it. Andrew would open it when he came back. I told him, I want to go with you because that was my chance to get out. Andrew denied the allegations of sexual abuse against Jane Doe when he had been arrested, and during an interview on the 5th of March, he said, I never touched the girl, but DNA would later be his undoing. DNA evidence was found on clothing and handcuffs. Jane Doe had also tested positive for chlamydia. Andrew Innes had chlamydia. Andrew Innes' trial began at the High Court in Edinburgh on January 31st, 2023, with Judge Lord Beckett presiding. Andrew admitted that he had killed Jellica and Benny Lynn, but denied murder and argued a defense of diminished responsibility. He had also denied charges of attempting to defeat the ends of justice and rape. On the third day of his trial, he changed his story again. He now said that he had become what he called apocalyptically angry after thinking that Benny Lynn resembled both his former partner and estranged wife. He said that from the neck down she looked like his estranged wife, and from the head up like the former partner. He said his former partner had left him in the most horrible way, dumping him through a text message, and that he thought of all the nasty things my wife had done to me. And I got angry. The way she treated me, I was furious. I started to crazy things. I remember the blade going in once. She was lying on the floor, and I was just hitting her until she stopped moving. In his testimony, he said that the killings had not been planned, saying if this was premeditated in any way it would have been cleaner, adding that the hammer he had purchased was not a useful weapon. He said it's ridiculous that I had returned with a hammer when I went out for petrol. Innes told the court that he was able to remember the initial strike and struggle that ensued in the kitchen before it moved out into the living room. He said it was an anger I have never experienced before in my entire life. When asked in his cross-examination what he had done with the bodies, he replied, I dug them a respectable grave and gave them a Christian burial and then replaced the floor. That's all I did. His original plan had been to bury them at sea, but instead decided to conceal their bodies under his kitchen floor, as he was already in the process of refurbishing the room. It was obvious that he had a deeply controlling nature when he admitted he had been seriously angry when his former wife had got a new haircut that he didn't approve of. He also said he had attempted to castrate himself with an electrical cord. There were moments when Innes would break down in the witness box and cry while speaking. A huge part of the trial focused on his state of mind. Psychiatrist Dr. Gordon Cowan, who specializes in forensic psychiatry, had met with Innes 8 times following his arrest and gave evidence on the 4th day of the trial. He explained that Innes' story had undergone multiple variations and changes, saying it had initially been self-defense, then he had been suffering with auditory hallucinations, and finally a combination of both. Dr. Cowan said, it's clear he held resentment towards his ex-partners, and this lady in front of him in some way reminded him of these ladies, and he became angry, uncontrollably angry at her. He explained to the jury, he said he acted in self-defense from an attack. Then he spoke of an internal monologue with a voice of a kind of identity that was advising him to hurt the woman, and he was saying she's done nothing wrong. It's really difficult to know for sure the symptoms, if any, Mr. Innes has at this time. Innes had been diagnosed with Crohn's disease, a condition that would lead to him being hospitalized in February of 2021 at Ninewells Hospital on the outskirts of Dundee. He was prescribed steroids to help ease the symptoms. Defense lawyer Brian McConaughey asked Dr. Cowan if Innes could have been experiencing psychosis induced by steroid use, as Innes had said he was insane as a result of the steroids. He had been prescribed to take 40 milligrams a day, but the court heard he had taken an increased dose in days before the murders. The fact that he had purchased the hammer from B&Q did not add up to this theory of psychosis. Dr. Cowan said that if someone was going through psychosis to the extent that they were going to commit murder, would not be going about their day as usual with people not noticing. There's logic in his thought process, so I don't necessarily think it's indicative of somebody who is psychotic, he said. He emphasized that while it is a rare side effect of the medication, within the previous 12 months, no patient from NHS Tayside had experienced an episode of psychosis resulting from steroids, and the majority of his colleagues had never seen it over the course of their entire careers. Dr. Cowan met Innes in September 2021 in prison, and Innes had spoken to members of his family and become aware of steroid-induced psychosis. This was the first time he had become aware of this phenomenon, and thought it perhaps fit with what happened to him, Dr. Cowan explained. Several of the professionals did consider that he had a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder, but the judge later said that this neither predisposed him to violence, nor that it gave any reduction on his culpability. One of the most heartbreaking moments of the trial came when the pre-recorded interview with Jane Doe was played. "Andrew killed Jellica when we were playing hide and seek," she said. She added that she didn't know what was happening. She also described the horrific sexual violence that she had been subjected to. The nature of the evidence was so distressing. Members of the jury were offered counseling to cope with what they had seen and listened to. On the charges relating to Jane Doe, Innes accused her of lying, saying that some parts of her story didn't add up. He argued he would not have used a sock to cover her mouth, as she had said, as there were hundreds of other items more suitable. "If I wanted to gag that child, I would have used an actual gag," he said. Innes told the jury that had the police officers arrived at his home just 24 hours later, they could have found her murdered body alongside Benny Lynn Angelica. After 5 days, the prosecution and defense rested their cases. Following the evidence that had been presented, Judge Lord Beckett gave instructions to the jury to find him guilty on both counts of murder. After just 2.5 hours of discussions, they returned their verdict. Andrew Innes was found guilty. Alongside his convictions of murder, he was also convicted of rape and sexual abuse. Andrew Innes was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 36 years that he must serve before he can even be considered for parole. You murdered an innocent woman and her 2-year-old daughter in a situation where they had trusted you and traveled with you from Bristol to your home in Dundee. These are amongst the very worst crimes which have come before the High Court of Justiciary. Considering the whole circumstances, the punishment part on the 2 charges of murder will be one of 36 years backdated to March 8, 2021. This does not mean that this is a sentence of 36 years. You are sentenced to life imprisonment, and you will serve at least 36 years before you can be considered for release on parole. It will be for the parole board to determine whether you will ultimately be released, and they will consider the safety of the public in reaching that decision. Almost 30 years of policing, the level of depravity shown by Andrew Innes is way beyond anything myself or my colleagues had witnessed before. Not only did he callously take the life of a young mother and innocent child, he then sought to escape justice by burying their bodies beneath his kitchen floor. He showed no regard for human life or for the remorse or suffering that he's brought to their loved ones. I'd like to end by thanking the family of Benel and Angelica for the courage they've shown throughout what's been a horrific ordeal, and I hope this conviction in some way helps to bring them a degree of closure. Thank you very much. This is probably one of the most horrific cases that I and my team have been involved in, and it's to credit to everyone involved with the commitment and professionalism they showed to secure justice for Benel and Angelica. The National Crime Agency described this as a once-in-a-generation crime, and I sincerely hope that no one else sees this ever again. Benelin's family had traveled from the Philippines to the United Kingdom for the trial. They said in a statement that what had happened was the worst cruelty we could ever imagine, adding that they would be forever haunted by the appalling crimes. She is very much missed by the family. Their loss incomprehensible to relatives in the Philippines. Brutal deaths that haunt a sister searching for answers. Her words translated by a friend. So Shelley is saying that in the last 2 years, it's been very difficult coping. They were in shock and traumatized by the fact that they couldn't understand why it happened. He showed no remorse, wallowed in self-pity. The depravity that he's shown is unimaginable. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive Andrew Innes after this? She said she can forgive him, but as long as he's behind bars and will not be able to come out. Benedicto, Benelin's father, had had his life completely destroyed by the loss of his daughter and granddaughter. The grief was so devastating he had been left unable to work. For Lexington, what had happened to Benelli and Angelica was devastating. He described his rage and pain at the cruelty that had been shown towards Angelica by Innes, and the appalling abuse and death she had suffered. It was later confirmed that Andrew Innes intended to appeal his conviction and sentence. His appeal was lodged at the High Court of Criminal Appeal in Edinburgh. The hearing will take place at a later date. No application for him to be released on bail pending his appeal was made, and he remains in prison. Jim Gamble, CEO of the Unique Safeguarding Group, who had also formerly led the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Organization, would say that it would be unusual for an offender like Innes if he did not have any previous victims. I doubt they are his only victims. Some people won't realize how close they came to engaging with this awful person. We see that all the time. We see predators who target single mothers, not just to manipulate and coercively control them, but to gain access to young children. I think anyone that knows of him, needs to reflect on what they know about him. I'm sure the police are doing exactly that. Police Scotland said they had contacted law enforcement in countries he was known to have gone to, and had also collaborated with Interpol, but no other crimes have been uncovered. Benallen's father said he cries every day, and is struggling to come to terms with what happened. For me, I still haven't accepted that they're gone, he said. Her family also began campaigning for a charity called Kanlungan, which offers support and help to people from the Philippines who live in the United Kingdom, including those affected by domestic abuse and violence. Benedicto said, "I've now decided to dedicate my life to defend the rights of women and children. All Benallen wanted was to love and be loved." She made the enormously brave decision to move away from her home to a country she didn't know, hoping for a bright future. To this day, Shella still calls her sister's phone just to hear her voice on the voicemail. She said that she will never forget either Benallen or Jellica because they will be with her wherever she goes, adding, "I will always be with them." Story 3. This case in northern British Columbia, Canada, back to the hot summer of July 2019. Northern British Columbia is a scenic and beautiful place that extends up to the Yukon-Alaska border and is surrounded by forests, valleys, volcanic rock formations, and mountains. A place where you can see anything and do everything, from hiking and fishing to skiing and wild and open water swimming. One young couple taking full advantage of all that British Columbia had to offer was the free-spirited and adventurous 24-year-old China Dees and 23-year-old Lucas Fowler, who were on a much-anticipated mini-break together. Lucas came from a big family in Sydney, Australia, and was the son of a New South Wales chief inspector. He found his main passion in life at a young age, traveling, and as he got older he wanted to see as much of the world as he could. Hiking, camping, surfing, swimming, you name it, Lucas wanted to do it. It was this excitement for adventure that saw him embark on a 2-year backpacking trip around the world. This would include spending time in Croatia, and it was here in 2017 he would meet his future girlfriend, China Dees, from North Carolina. She had studied in Europe and worked on a grape farm, saving up as much as she could, and in just a few years she had visited 13 countries. Safe to say they were the perfect match and were in sync right away. Their families both loved each other and recognized that this was a relationship that would go the distance. They were full of happiness and joy just being together, Lucas' father Stephen said. The day she stole Lucas' heart, she became a part of the family. "We were so happy he had met a life partner." China and Lucas spent as much time as they could together, despite the huge distance between them, and would talk for hours on the phone, reminiscing about their past trips and excitedly planning their future ones. In the 2 years they were together, they spent time in Central and South America, Japan, and Southeast Asia. The couple spent Christmas together in America with China's family, before Lucas left to work on a ranch in British Columbia. Now that he had a visa, it meant that the 10,000 miles between the pair wasn't quite so big and scary anymore, and much more feasible to work around. China soon joined him for a short holiday out there, and it was here that the pair made a plan to road trip through Canada together over the coming summer. They wanted to see as much as possible on the journey, and their final stop would be Alaska. Lucas spent time doing up his 1986 blue Chevrolet minivan in preparation, and he and China couldn't wait for the break, doing what they loved most together. On the evening of July 13th, with the trip now several days and away, the couple pulled into a gas station in Fort Nelson, British Columbia. CCTV showed them embracing, content, and without a care in the world. Before filling up their van and cleaning some of the windows, they paid and drove off. China, who had been texting her mother Sheila quite regularly, sent a message saying, "We won't have Wi-Fi for a while, so don't worry Mom, and I love you." The following day, however, about 200 miles away, they hit a bump in the road. Their van broke down along the Alaska Highway, known as Highway 97, near a popular tourist area, Leard River Hot Springs. A fellow tourist named Charles noticed the broken-down van and stopped to help, but Lucas was happy and chatty and assured him it was all under control. He said they would carry on trying to fix it, but if they had no luck they would call a tow truck in the morning when they could get some phone service. Charles told them he was going to be camping about 3 miles away and would come back in the morning to check on them. He left them sitting on the side of the road, eating some food, and happily embracing the situation that would likely stress most people out. At about 11:30 that night, with the couple still stranded and working on the vehicle, a road maintenance worker drove past. She saw a man with a beard talking to China and Lucas, and described him as seeming frustrated, and the conversation appeared heated. She didn't stop, but she said something about seeing that encounter gave her a bad feeling. "If you just get a bad feeling, and that's what I had, you just don't stop," she later said. She recalled that both of the right doors of the couple's van were open, and it looked as if the man with the beard had come from a gray car nearby, but she couldn't be sure. July 15th, 6:20 a.m. A trucker going down Highway 97 spotted something in the distance that instantly caught his eye. As he pulled closer, he realized what it was he was looking at. It was the bodies of China and Lucas. They were face down in a ditch about 10 feet from their van, and about 15 feet from each other. They were both cold to the touch, and had been dead for some time. He called someone over to help, and started frantically trying to redirect traffic and stop people from driving through. The police were now receiving multiple calls about this. And when they got to the scene at 7:20 a.m., they found the same trucker still doing his best to control the situation, but clearly distraught and very traumatized at what he had driven into. China and Lucas had been shot to death, and the medical examiner confirmed both entry and exit wounds. The van's back doors were open, and the window was smashed. Nearby was 5 spent shell cases and China's phone. Lucas' phone was not found. Just after 9 a.m., Charles, the other tourist that had talked with them the day before, kept to his promise and drove back to check on them. When he was met with police blocks in the road, he simply couldn't believe this had happened. Now to a murder mystery. On a highway in Canada, an American woman and her boyfriend killed during a road trip. And while police aren't sharing many details, the big concern is that the killer is still on the run. This morning, an urgent manhunt in the mysterious murder of an American woman and her boyfriend in Canada. Their bodies found along the side of a rural highway. I don't know who would do something like this. This was someone's son, someone's daughter. China Deeza's mother says the 24-year-old from Charlotte and her Australian boyfriend Lucas Fowler had just set out on a road trip to see Canada's national parks when they were killed sometime between Sunday evening and Monday morning. Their van found parked nearby. This is an international murder case in Canada of an Australian and an American, and still no large public travelers notice or anything. Now urging anyone who was on that stretch of Alaska Highway 97 in British Columbia and may have dashcam video from the area to call investigators who are desperately scouring for leads. Deeza's family concerned the killer is still free. This morning, they are pleading for answers. It doesn't add up, and it's concerning. And we're never going to get full closure on this, and it's going to hurt the rest of our lives. And Fowler's father is a senior police officer in Australia. This morning, his colleagues say they've learned both victims were shot to death. Investigators in Canada are also clarifying that this does not appear to be connected to any other cases, and they call finding this killer their top priority. As word started to travel, the witness from the previous day gave the description of the man with the beard she saw talking to the couple. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police released a composite based on this, and asked for anyone with dashcam footage to please come forward. Back in Australia, the news had also hit hard, and police over there offered their support to the Canadian authorities. Not only had they lost Lucas, but his father Stephen was a serving police officer, and they wanted to help him as much as they could. The young man was the son of one of our serving police officers. So clearly what is a tragic event has been made all the more sadder for us, knowing there's a son of one of our serving police officers. The RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police, is an outstanding organization. We have the utmost confidence in their capacity and capability to run this investigation. But our commissioner has made a great decision to send over 2 officers to assist in the liaison, purely to assist the family. Another driver would then ask to talk to the police, and told them that he had pulled over at the side of the road in the same area to take a quick nap. He said within 5 minutes of being parked, a small van drove past him and stopped about 50 yards ahead. A man got out of the passenger side, holding a rifle. He then started quickly moving towards him, holding the gun, in a way the witness described as a hunting stance. The truck then started moving slowly towards him too. The driver put his foot down and sped off, fearing for his life. He couldn't see their faces and didn't want to stop to look. This investigation is in its very infancy, and it's not yet clear whether Lucas and China were targeted, or if this was an opportunity, a crime of opportunity. At this point, we have nothing to indicate that their deaths are linked to any other active and ongoing investigations in that area of the province, or that there's a heightened risk to public safety because of this. This is a unique circumstance in northern British Columbia. There's no indication that there's been a spike in any crimes. and that this is something that we appreciate the fact that these rumors are going out there, but at this point there's nothing to indicate that these rumors are true. As you know, I may be an experienced police officer, but today I'm standing here as the father of a murder victim. We're just distraught. This has really torn two families apart. Our son Lucas was having the time of his life traveling the world. He met a beautiful young lady, and they teamed up. They were a great pair, and they fell in love, hopeful of a positive outcome. And obviously we're appealing, along with the RMCP, for anyone to contact who may have any information whatsoever. I know there's been a lot of speculation, but look, as an experienced police officer, I know how these investigations go. My family and I are more than satisfied with the resources of the RMCP that they're putting into this. And I can tell you I am more than confident in the commitment of all the officers who are working on this case. 5 days later, on the 19th of July, another disturbing scene would unfold 300 miles away. Near Dease Lake in British Columbia, a burnt-out camper van was found. The number plate was still intact enough to run through the database, and it came back as belonging to 19-year-old Cam McLeod, who had been out on a road trip with his best friend, 18-year-old Briar Smigowski. Cam and Briar were both from Vancouver, Ireland, and were colleagues at a Walmart. They had both recently quit, deciding to go to Yukon for work. They had left their homes on the 12th of July, a trip their family had described as a spur-of-the-moment one, but they were supportive nonetheless. The last anyone had seen of them before the van was found was when they had stopped for coffee at a place called Jade City, somewhere that was happy to offer a free coffee to drivers passing through. The owner of the store remembered them coming in, but said there was nothing unusual about their stop, and they didn't seem to be in any distress or trouble. And now they were both missing, and their truck was burned and destroyed. To add more to the already unnerving story, about a mile away from the teens' burning van, the body of a man who had also been shot was found. He had no idea on him, so police released a sketch and description. He was believed to be in his 50s or 60s and had a big gray beard. Although this was a nearly 8-hour drive from where Lucas and China were found, was it possible that all these cases were connected? We're in Canada now, where a murdered couple and the disappearance of 2 teens may actually be linked. Police in British Columbia released this sketch of a person of interest, and they're looking for answers after American China Dees and her Australian boyfriend, Lucas Fowler, were found dead. And so we recognize that there is a possibility that these could be linked. 48 Hours has previously reported on a notorious remote stretch of road near these crimes dubbed the Highway of Tears. At least 18 women in the last 40 years have disappeared or been found murdered along it. As authorities investigate whether any of these new cases might be related, the victims' friends and family want answers. As authorities continued to look for the missing teens, the families of China and Lucas both flew in, faced with the unthinkable task of bringing their bodies home. Alan Schmeigelski, Briar's father, said the last he had heard from his son was a text message saying that contact would likely be scarce due to a lack of phone service. When he saw his son's and Cam's faces on a paper, only then did he realize they were both missing. Cam had last made contact with his family on the 17th of July, saying he and Briar had made it to Yukon, which was their intended final stop. So what had made them carry on so far past it? Or had they actually even made it there in the first place? There were so many questions. In the space of just a few days, 3 people had been killed and 2 were now missing under deeply concerning circumstances. The Dease Lake area investigation into the disappearance of Cam McLeod and Briar Schmeigelski, their vehicle recovery, and the discovery of an unidentified deceased male continues. That's the last time I had contact with my kid. That was on the 12th. On the 12th. Any idea what might have happened or theories that you're kind of coming up with at this point? All I can think of is they were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. They're both kids. They're nonviolent. They're good people. You would call them good people. They're just young people, but they're good people. Never got in trouble or anything, right? I'm thinking that a murder was committed 2 kilometers away, and somebody decided, well, let's take care of the witnesses. As the sketch of the 3rd victim started circulating, a woman named Helen called in. She was the wife of 64-year-old Leonard Dick, and she thought the sketch looked just like him. Leonard had gone camping a few days before, something he did a lot, and up until the evening of July 18th, he had been texting Helen and his children constantly, but she hadn't heard from him since then. Although DNA testing needed to be carried out, they now felt strongly that this was the man. Leonard was described as a caring husband, attentive father, and a cherished lecturer, teaching botany at the University of British Columbia. His students loved him and found him fascinating, saying his passion for teaching and how much he loved what he spoke about inspired them to want to learn more. He had a dry and witty sense of humor that kept everyone entertained, and as well as his job, he enjoyed drawing, writing short plays and poems, playing guitar, and of course, the great outdoors. Despite the fact he was often presenting to huge groups at a time, his family said he could be surprisingly quiet and very private, hence the reason he loved his solo camping trips so much. He had just celebrated his 64th birthday, and on the 16th of July, he had packed up a small camping stove, some food and a tent, and had driven off in his Toyota RAV4, excited to explore more and learn as he went. He told his wife he wanted to find and photograph some grizzlies and teach himself about the wildlife. On July 21st, some CCTV from Meadow Lake, Saskatchewan came in, and this would change everything. Cameras had picked up none other than a gray 2011 Toyota RAV4, and inside of the car was Cam McLeod and Briar Schmegelski, the two missing teenagers. More footage showed Cam and Briar buying some black tape, which they put over parts of the car, seemingly in an attempt to disguise it in some way, although of course this didn't work. It was quite clearly Leonard's car. A few days later, with it now safe to do so, a proper search of the burnt-out camper van was carried out. Officers found rounds of ammunition that matched what was found at both crime scenes. Just after this, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police issued a bombshell statement that the public had not been expecting. Today I'm here to request public assistance in locating suspects in connection to the Northern British Columbia investigations. Cam and Briar are no longer considered missing. The RCMP are now considering Cam McLeod and Briar Schmegelski as suspects in the Dees Lake suspicious death and the double homicide of Lucas Fowler and China Dees. We're asking for the public, if you spot Briar or Cam, consider them dangerous. Do not approach, take no action, and call immediately 911. The two teens that everyone was out looking for, praying to find them safe, and well, were actually the suspected killers of China, Lucas, and Leonard. Cam had a possession and acquisition license, and before they had left Vancouver, Ireland, they had purchased an SKS semi-automatic rifle and 20 rounds of ammunition. It turned out that just before the press release announcing that the pair were now wanted, Cam and Briar had actually been stopped by First Nation safety officers doing a routine alcohol check in Split Lake, Manitoba. With no alcohol found on them, they were let go and sent on their way. The safety officers had no idea the announcement that was to come, and by the skin of their teeth the teens had narrowly evaded being caught and detained. Where they were now was anyone's guess. A day later, on July 23rd, a local man called Billy Beardy and his wife Tamara actually located the gray Toyota near Fox Lake Cree Nation, north of a place called Gillam in Manitoba. This vehicle was also on fire, just burning away in the woods. Next to the car were some half-eaten pork chops, pots and pans, orange peels, keys, matches, and various tools. As suspected, the car's number plate was linked to Leonard Dick, and DNA tests soon confirmed, just as his wife Helen had feared Leonard was most definitely the third victim. Cam McLeod and Briar Schmegelski are facing murder charges in the death of Leonard, Dick, the third victim, in those killings in northern BC. 2 days later, arrest warrants were issued for the two, and named as official suspects in the deaths of China and Lucas as well. The search for the pair, which had actually started almost 2,000 miles away across 3 provinces, suddenly descended on the small town of Gillam, close to where Leonard's car had been found by Billy and Tamara. Gillam has a population of less than 1,500 people, and only one road going in and out. It was here that the police set up their base. The whole area was put on lockdown, and officers told residents to be wary, to keep their doors locked day and night, and to only leave the house if necessary. Search parties also found out into the surrounding areas, combing through everything as meticulously as possible. Alan, Briar's father, then heard on the news that not only was his son missing, but he was actually a suspect in a string of awful crimes. My heart just sank. I told myself, there's a mistake. There's got to be a mistake, he recalled. Cam's girlfriend then contacted the police and told them that he had sent her a text message on the 13th of July telling her he would not be returning home. It was a very cryptic and unexpected message. The police presence in Gillam was immense, and they felt strongly that without a vehicle, and with the whole world now watching, they were probably in this area and laying low. The mayor said the town had gone from seeing maybe 2 or 3 police officers over a couple of days to hundreds patrolling the streets morning, noon, and night. Billy said it was tough to see so much police presence there when the car had been found in Fox Lake, Cree Nation. His small and scared community didn't even have working streetlights, let alone the authorities' support. At the end of July, however, police announced that they were pulling a lot of the resources that were going into the hunt, calling it a phased withdrawal. By this point, the search had been going on for about a week. Police had searched almost 4,000 square miles, followed up on over 1,000 tips, knocked on over 500 doors, including those of the teens' parents, and had even been working with the military. There were drones, helicopters, crisis negotiators' dogs, and hundreds of people involved in the searches. Alan said he believed his son was in a lot of pain mentally and wanted to die in a confrontation with the police. Going to go out in a blaze of glory, trust me on this. That's what they're going to do, he said. The families of both teams were begging them to come home and turn themselves in so they could deal with whatever had happened together. Just as resources and teams started being pulled, police got 2 more tips. Some members of the Bear Clan Patrol, a First Nations neighborhood watch group, said they had spotted whom they described as 2 tall, slender individuals digging around near a landfill before they ran away into the woods. But this was in York Landing, almost 80 miles away from where everyone was looking. The mayor of Gillam said that if they had actually made it all the way there, he was almost impressed, as it would be pretty impossible to do without being caught. But after looking, police said they couldn't substantiate this claim. Canada Manhunt Day 8, the search for those 2 most wanted Canadians continues today. Disappointing yesterday because the RCMP had placed a lot of stock in a tip that they got at a place called York Landing about 200 kilometers from where we are here. That turned out to be unsuccessful. They searched from Sunday night into Monday and found that they could not locate the 2 suspects of the tactical units, the Emergency Response Team, or the RCMP. They are here. They are awaiting orders to go out and perform more searches, but this is an active investigation. They have police dogs. They have all kinds of RCMP logistics here, mostly from Manitoba. There's some from Alberta who've also been brought in, and of course residents here wondering when this is all going to end. They have been on edge for the last week, wondering when the 2 suspects were going to be caught, when their lives would be able to go back to normal. Back to you. Billy Beardy was now involved with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in a big way, and was almost spearheading the searches, guiding them on where to go and leading the way. When authorities realized just how knowledgeable Billy was when it came to the area and the terrain, they knew they had to use it. The team started going back along the Nelson River by boat, and it was here that they found Cam's backpack with a box of ammunition inside, along with his wallet and some clothes. They also located a toiletry bag belonging to Leonard and a sleeping bag. Billy pointed out that the water was so fast-moving, and there were so many swells, these items definitely hadn't just washed up there. They had been dumped there, indicating that the pair were still on foot, but likely slowing down and struggling. They were clearly getting rid of excess weight and baggage, as they were becoming more tired and hungry, fighting a tough terrain that was teeming with insects and bears, and filled with swampy areas that you could sink into very quickly, all this only being exacerbated by the sweltering heat. Billy said that if you went into some parts without any help or knowledge, the land would not forgive you, and it could prove fatal. Some parts were so inhospitable and treacherous, even the locals wouldn't dream of venturing out. It is really hard to comprehend just how expansive, dense, and dark so much of this area is, and although police admitted it was simply not possible to get the manpower to search every single part of it, they did seem to be closing in on them given the clues they were finding. On August 2nd, as helicopters and drones slowly flew back over the Nelson River, a small and damaged boat was spotted along the shoreline. The teens' families were still praying they would turn themselves in and be found safely with Cam's dad, saying, "We try to wrap our heads around what is happening and hope that Cam will come home to us safely so we can all get to the bottom of this story." But Alan said he was now coming to terms with the situation at hand. Initially, it looked like they were victims as well, right? Initially. But both of them have to have a lot of pain inside. Both of them. A normal child doesn't travel across the country killing people. A child in some very serious pain does. Mounties are going to shoot first and ask questions later. Basically, he's going to be dead today or tomorrow. I knew that. I was saying, rest in peace, my love. I love you. I'm so sorry all this had to happen. I'm so sorry that I couldn't rescue you. Billy was still in charge of operating the jet boats, and with a team of Royal Canadian Mounted Police on board, they went down the river for a final time. Whilst out in the water, Billy spotted a raven jump in a riverside ravine. This caught his attention immediately, as he knew this indicated some sort of carcass had to be around for it to be feeding on. Any kind of bushman knows that if there's a raven there, he's eating something, he said. Billy knew in his guts that they needed to focus more of their attention in this exact area. And on August 7th, 2019, exactly where Billy stopped the boat and saw the Raven authorities found 2 bodies. Near the creek, just off from the Nelson River, amongst some bushes, were the bodies of 19-year-old Cam McLeod and 18-year-old Bryish Mijelski. Almost 2,000 miles from where it had all started on the highway, the hunt had finally come to an end. The teenage suspects in the shooting death of an Australian tourist, and 2 others have been found dead in a remote part of Manitoba. This morning at approximately 10 a.m., RCMP officers located 2 male bodies in the dense brush within 1 kilometer from where the items were found. This is approximately 8 kilometers from where the burnt vehicle was located. At this time, we believe these are the bodies of the 2 suspects wanted in connection with the homicides in British Columbia. To the families of everyone affected by the series of events over the last few weeks, I know it has been so very difficult, and I hope today's announcement can begin to bring some closure. Billy then spent the next 13 hours going back and forth, bringing all the police and experts in and out by boat. Officers admitted they really would have been lost without him. The medical examiner couldn't exactly say when the pair had died, but they determined that Cam had shot Briar before shooting himself in what they believe was a pack. Next to Cam's body was one of the rifles, and the other was still loosely in his grasp. A digital camera, actually belonging to Leonard, was also found nearby. It had 6 videos and 3 images on it, which included one of Briar posing with one of the semi-automatic rifles and a selfie of Cam. In the first video, both teens took responsibility for all 3 murders, but gave no motive as to why they had done it. In the second video, Briar talks to the camera and explains that they have reached the Nelson River intending to take the boat out and flee, but because the current was so strong, he said they may have to kill themselves. Cam agreed, and in the third video they seemed to change their mind and said they planned to kill more people by taking the boat and going to Europe or Africa and carrying on their killing spree there. The other videos, however, went back to their plans to take their own lives and expressing their desire to be cremated if they were found. Police described the videos as cold, remorseless, and matter-of-fact. Brayer's father, Alan, said he wanted to see the videos for himself and said he just couldn't believe that this had all happened. Police said it didn't appear that either one of them was the driving force or the ringleader. It seemed they were both equal and willing partners in everything they were doing, despite the public and media asking questions and Alan asking to see the tapes. Detectives have never released them. They believe that Cam and Briar may have made the videos for notoriety, and releasing them would be seen as an insult to the victims. Based on the firearms lab results, crime scene examination timelines of suspects and suspect recorded admissions, we believe that no other suspects were responsible for the 3 homicides or were involved in any way. A digital camera belonging to Mr. Dick was also discovered. It contained 6 videos and 3 still images. The RCMP has chosen not to release the videos. Releasing them would not only be disrespectful to the families of the deceased, who are also concerned about the impact of the release, but it could sensationalize the actions of the suspects. The RCMP Behavioral Analysis Unit conducted a review of the videos and was concerned with a behavior called identification, which is considered a warning behavior in the context of threat assessments. The videos may influence or inspire other individuals to carry out a targeted act of violence, essentially creating copycats. According to sources, there were some red flags. Friends said that Briar was obsessed with Hitler and the Third Reich and purchased lots of memorabilia. He also had a fascination with guns from a young age. Alan said although this had left him deeply upset and riddled with guilt, he also recognized that his son needed professional help. He described Brayer's early life as troubled, and when Alan and his wife Deborah had divorced, this had affected his son a lot. He recalled that he took solace in YouTube and video games, seldom communicating, or sharing his feelings, becoming slowly more and more introverted. Briar would often say to his friends when playing shooting games, "What if this was real?" Can you imagine if this was real? Getting very excited about this idea in a way his friends never were and found odd. Cam's family said they couldn't believe this was the quiet, polite, and kind young man they all knew. Helen, Leonard's wife, said for nearly 3 weeks over the summer of 2019, what would be one of Canada's largest nationwide manhunts had gripped not only the locals but the rest of the world as well. An extensive search covering thousands of miles that ended just as mysteriously as it had started, with no motive No reason, no answers, and no closure for anyone. No one will ever know how everyone happened to come into contact with each other, and what took place when they did. Billy Beardy, who had been so vital in helping bring this case to a conclusion, would later be honored by the Powhatan Tribal Council for his contribution to the search efforts, with people calling him a pillar of the community. He was presented with a star blanket and an eagle feather. Every patch on the quilt represents a person, and it means you are surrounded by those who love, support, and will protect you. Billy's wife said she was so proud of him, but was sad that he hadn't been treated like one of the team. He had been out there day in day out with no protection, safety gear or life jacket, and he could very easily have lost his life in trying to help. The lead investigator acknowledged this and apologized. In October 2019, Billy was elected chief of Fox Lake Cree Nation and was also later honored by the Gillam Royal Canadian Mounted Police. One has to wonder if he hadn't spotted the Raven, recognized what it meant, and turned the boat back around, how much longer the search for the teens would have gone on for, and if they would ever have been found at all. It is a senseless case that still grips people to this day, and one that will leave everyone guessing and clutching at nothing but speculative thoughts and ideas. The Assistant Commissioner Kevin Hackett said it was one of the most dynamic and unpredictable cases in his memory, which brings today's episode to somewhat of a conclusion. Doris, Leonard's sister, said if there was anything positive to come out of her brother's death, it would be all the people coming forward to speak about how much he had impacted their lives. She took comfort in that, even though she knew the ever-private and humble Leonard would have hated every bit of the attention. China's mom Sheila said she would look at the CCTV of them in the gas station all the time. I watched that video over and over. I kept seeing new things and watching that embrace that they had. I could hear them saying, "Let's do this, here we go." Saying it was their purpose to travel the world together, and what they had seen and done at such a young age was remarkable. The families, friends, and loved ones of China, Lucas and Leonard, described the loss as profound. They hope that everyone will remember them for the kind and adventurous way in which they loved to live, and not for the awful ways in which their lives so cruelly came to an end. Story 4. This case takes us to a country we have never been to before on one of our episodes, Pakistan. Pakistan is a fascinating country, with some of the most breathtaking scenery you can find anywhere in the world. Pakistan has lived through social and economic difficulties, and its history is both extremely interesting and gripping. It's home to more than 200 million people, with more than 10 million people living in the city of Lahore, where this story takes place. Tuesday, 9th of October, 2001. In Block 7 of the maximum security Kotlakpat jail, a guard was making the morning rounds, waking prisoners up at around 5 a.m. As he came to one of the cells, the prisoner was lying on the floor. The guard opened the cell door to check on him. The prisoner was not responding. He had clearly been dead for a few hours at this point. In a separate cell, the body of another prisoner was found. With the two prisoners now dead, it appeared to be the end of a case that had shocked Pakistan. But people were left with more questions than answers. Our story begins in 1999, as the dawn of a new millennium was approaching. In May of that year, General Pervez Musharraf had taken control of the government after a coup, and Pakistan's economy was struggling. The future for many seemed somewhat uncertain, as the daily struggle to make ends meet was widespread. In search of a better life, many people would leave their villages and head into the cities like Lahore. Every single day, people arrived in Lahore in search of a brighter future, hoping to find what the city had to offer them. Amongst those who go to Lahore are young boys who have run away from their homes, looking for something new. But the reality of life in the city is very different. What happens to many of these vulnerable children is awful. They are often targeted and exploited for cheap labor, and also sexually abused. They fend for themselves in a place they don't know, without the security and safety of good adults around them to care for them. In late November 1999, for police in Lahore, their day had started as normal. When checking through the mail that had been delivered, a letter was found. Unfolding the paper, the words written on it were graphic and horrifying. It was a confession. My count has reached 100. With the grace of God, I have accomplished my mission. Tears roll down my cheeks. I will make sure my mission and my message reaches the world. I am going to make many mothers weep. I will send their sons to the next world without coffins through the gutter. The letter detailed the names of the victims and gave a minute-by-minute account as to what had happened to them and how they had met their deaths. Every grim detail was in there, how long it took to dissolve a body, and how much the acid had cost him. He then gave the address for this alleged house of horrors. 16B, Ravi Road. The deputy superintendent of police, Tariq Kambo, took a couple of officers to 16B, Ravi Road to investigate. After knocking on the door, the homeowner appeared, 38-year-old Javad Iqbal. The police quizzed him on the letter, asking for more details, and if he knew anything about it. Javad quickly became unpredictable and volatile, grabbing a gun and saying he would take his own life if they didn't go away. So the police left. They didn't question him further, they didn't remove the gun, they didn't even go into the property. This man can't be a killer of 100 kids, he's a nutcase, Kambo said to the fellow officers. As they walked away from 16B, they had no idea that they had just encountered evil. They had walked away from Pakistan's worst serial killer. November 22, 1999. A package was delivered to the office of the Daily Jang, the oldest broadsheet newspaper in the country. It had been sent to the chief crime reporter, a man called Jamil Chishti. Upon opening the package, Jamil discovered a handwritten letter and a series of photographs. The letter read as follows: "If you go to my home, you will find all the evidence. When you discover what I have achieved, it will shock the world. My first victim was a 14-year-old from Faisalabad. I gave him some sleeping tablets and orange juice. When he was asleep, I placed a gas mask on his face and gave him cyanide. He was dead within 10 seconds. His body was put into a drum of acid and in one night turned to liquid. After that, I started murdering every night and disposing of the bodies. I am Javad Iqbal." The parcel also contained the 32-page diary he had mentioned in the letter and a notebook, giving horrific and disturbing details of each murder. After going through the contents of the envelope, I thought there could be two possibilities. Either someone was trying to frame him, or this man has really done it, Jamil would later say. He wasted no time and went straight to 16B, Ravi Road with one of his colleagues, the address that had been given on the letter. They climbed the wall and jumped over. The property had been abandoned and padlocked. After gaining entry, they found clothes and shoes piled up, alongside sleeping pills and children's board games. Several blue plastic barrels were also dotted around. This was a detail that had been mentioned in the letter. Both of them could smell something strange and unpleasant. All around the apartment, cards were pinned up on the walls, giving details of alleged victims and how they had been murdered. One card said that he saw himself as a type of vigilante, accusing the government of failing to act on crime. This area has been turned into a breeding ground of crime. Runaway children seek refuge here and learn to commit murder, theft, pickpocketing, and get involved into moral activities. If the government can't stop this, then ordinary people will have to find their own solution, as I did. One of the other cards read, "The 5 sacks lying in one corner of this room contain the clothes of 100 victims, while the remaining 3 sacks contain 85 pairs of shoes belonging to them." Another card read, "The bodies in the house have been deliberately not disposed of, so that the authorities will find them after my suicide. I'm going to jump into the river Ravi to commit suicide." As they carried on looking through the property, the strange smell still hung in the air. They decided to take the lid off of one of the barrels. Nothing could have prepared them for what they found. There, floating in an unknown liquid, appeared to be human remains. It appeared that the confession had been true. The newspaper decided to take this story to print, and on the 3rd of December, they ran the shocking headline, "Claim of Murder of 100 Kids." They printed the photos and names of 57 missing boys, who were now presumed murdered. The shoes and clothes that had been found were taken to the police station in order for them to be identified and linked to any of the missing boys. Parents broke down in uncontrollable sobs as they recognized the clothes of their children. The police ran tests on the contents of the barrels and found that they contained a combination of sulfuric and hydrochloric acid. They had a confession. They had a detailed account of the murders. They had a crime scene. They had several bodies, but they had no suspect in custody. Javad Iqbal was on the run, and the largest manhunt Pakistan had ever seen was launched. It had now been a week since the letter and confession had been sent to the Daily Jang. 2 people were arrested after attempts had been made to cash checks that belonged to Javad Iqbal. They allegedly told the police that they were partners in crime and confessed to committing sexual violence against some of the boys that had been killed. The police still couldn't find Javad Iqbal, and the hunt was ramping up to find him. People were hopeful that he hadn't acted on his promise to end his life, and that they would find him in time to bring him to justice. Another man called Ishak Billah had also been arrested as an accomplice for allegedly being the one who had sold Javdik Baldi Assad. Just a few days later, on the December 7th, Ishak was being interrogated at the CIA headquarters in Lahore. During the interrogation, he jumped out of a window on the 3rd floor. He was killed instantly, and witnesses who saw this happen said he was not wearing handcuffs when he fell. It was reported that when a post-mortem was carried out, there was evidence to suggest that force had been used. 3 officers were arrested following his suicide, and 2 senior officials were transferred. It was unclear as to whether or not they were amongst the 3 officers that had been arrested. With one of the alleged accomplices now dead, they needed to find Javed Iqbal sooner rather than later. As he had said, his plan had been to drown himself in the Ravi River. The police searched the river with nets, but nobody was found. Just as they were losing hope, the news would soon come in that they had been waiting for. 1999, Javed Iqbal finally surrendered. He walked into the office of the Daily Jang and told the staff working there, "I am Javed Iqbal, killer of 100 children. I hate this world. I am not ashamed of my actions, and I am ready to die. I have no regrets. I killed 100 children. I could have killed 500, this was not the problem. But the pledge I had taken was of 100 children, and I never wanted to violate this." Those working in the office were stunned. What was even more surprising was that he spoke to journalists there for the next hour, detailing how he had committed the murders and disposed of the bodies. Employees of the paper quickly contacted the authorities, and more than 100 soldiers soon had the building completely surrounded. When speaking with the journalists, the only pity he showed was towards himself, saying he was a victim of the police system, irregularities in the jail system in Pakistan, and injustice in other sections of society. He was swiftly placed under arrest. As the pieces of the puzzle were coming together, more and more was coming out about Javed and his disturbing past. He was the 6th child of a wealthy family. He had 4 sisters and 5 brothers. His father was a successful businessman, and both he and his wife doted on their son. He was spoiled and pampered, constantly told how brilliant and how intelligent he was compared to his siblings. Early on in his childhood, he showed signs of serious aggression. He would physically attack other children and would also kill animals. His brother said as a boy he was violent and eccentric. He would give a lot of headache to our parents. Javed would go into a trance. Sometimes he would wake everyone up in the middle of the night and ask us to line up behind him. It was like some spirit had possessed him. I really think he was possessed as a kid. According to his brother, if Javed wanted something and their father refused, he would threaten to harm himself until he got his own way. Upon leaving Islamia High School, he went on to attend Islamia College. He had an engineering business set up for him by his father, who also purchased 2 villas, and a steel recasting business was run from one of the properties. Whilst working, he employed young boys to work in the business, as it was cheaper to employ them. In 1983, after years of refusing to allow his parents to arrange a marriage for him, he announced he would be getting married to a bride of his own choosing. She was the older sister of one of the boys he knew. It was reported that this was orchestrated by Javed to stop the boy from leaving him. The couple would go on to have a daughter. His violence soon began to come to the surface again. He committed assault against the son of a well-known and highly regarded resident of the area, and the incident was taken to the elders. Javed confessed what he had done and signed a document, promising he would not do it again. Copies were printed of the document and put up around the area, and he visited 100 shops to apologize for his actions. He also set up a shop selling video games, the first one of its kind in the area. He offered lower rates for young boys, or would give them things for free. One particularly insidious thing he would do would be to drop money on the floor near a boy. Once the boy had picked up the money, Javed would say his money had been stolen and that he needed to search everyone. Once he found the money on the boy who had picked it up, he would take him to a different room, saying he needed to perform a strip search. He would then brutally, sexually attack the boy. Sometimes he would give the boy the money to keep as a so-called gesture of goodwill. People in the area quizzed him on why he only hired young boys. He said he was doing it out of the kindness of his heart, helping runaways and caring for them, adding that he loved them. Parents in the area stopped letting their children visit his shop, so he started both an aquarium and also a gym in a bid to get boys to go. Another one of his schemes was to set up a school with air conditioning called Sunnyside School. The school failed as parents refused to let their children attend. Another business was a shop that sold products at a discounted rate, but this too failed after just a few weeks. Not only was he wealthy, he also maintained good connections with the police and invested in a magazine called Anti-Corruption Crime, often praising the police for their work. During this time, he interviewed more than 20 officers about their lines of work and duty. He lied to his neighbors and said he was a high-ranking police officer who worked in an anti-corruption unit. He was acutely aware of how the legal system worked. He would later serve a 6-month stint in prison for rape against a boy, but even this did not make him afraid of the authorities or of being caught. In late 1990, a father filed a complaint with the police, alleging that Javed had raped his son. After the police failed to locate him, they arrested his father and 2 of his brothers, keeping them in prison for 7 days. Javed still refused to give himself up. On the 8th day of their detention, the police made another arrest. This time it was a boy who had been staying at Javed's house, and he too was taken to the police station. Just a few hours later, Javed Iqbal showed up. He verbally abused members of his family for failing to stop the police from arresting the boy, before finally giving himself up to the authorities in exchange for the boy's release. It was later alleged that he had bribed the police and the parents of the boy who had filed the complaint, in exchange for no charges being filed. His brother would later say in a documentary that the family had found out about Javed's pedophilia in 1991, after he had been taken into custody, accused of raping 2 young boys. So disgusted by his actions, his wife left him, and most of his family severed ties too. Javed would later remarry and have a son, but this marriage soon fell apart too. When his father passed away in 1993, few were left who would protect him. When he was next caught, he was beaten and thrown out of the area. However, with the passing of his father came an inheritance of 3 million rupees. In 1995, he began building a mansion in Rana town. He was a keen videographer, using his camcorder to capture all aspects of his life, including his home. The property was enormous, boasting a pool, wild animals, and a sprawling underground space. He continued his schemes to try and meet young boys. Another method he used was using children's magazines to find pen friends. He would receive photographs of these pen friends and would then shortlist them to the children he found attractive and actively engage with them. He would send presents and money, grooming them, trying to get them to send photographs of themselves or go and visit him. As his extravagant spending continued, he was no longer living within his means. His money was rapidly running out. In 1997, his finances were in serious trouble, so he sold his mansion and moved to a different part of the city. One of the boys that had been picked up by Javed Iqbal would manage to escape. He had run away from a small, poor village where jobs were hard to come by. He had boarded a bus to Lahore, hoping he would find a better life ahead of him. Javed approached the child while he was sitting in a park. He was carrying a postcard and told the boy he was a father looking for his son, who was missing, and asked him to help in the search. Javed then took the boy back to his property, where he beat him and told him if he tried to escape, he would shoot him. Whenever Javed left, the boy would be locked inside. Whilst held captive, the boy saw Javed bring other boys back, where they would be sexually assaulted and abused. On one occasion, Javed told the boy to take his clothes off. When he refused, he was beaten. The terrified child got undressed. Javed Iqbal then raped him. Located in Lahore is the Dutta Darbar, the largest Sufi shrine in South Asia. Many of those in need go there, as people often donate food for the needy. This was one of his hunting grounds, knowing there would be boys looking for food and shelter. In September of 1998, he was back at Dutta Darbar. I saw an attractive 18-year-old youth. I offered him a job as my servant, and he agreed, so I took him home. The boy, who was still being held captive, said that Javed had brought the youth back and taken him to his bedroom for a massage. Javed Iqbal would later rape him. I locked the door and put the key under my pillow. We all went to sleep. The boy who was being held captive said that he and the 18-year-old slept on the floor. During the night, Javed was attacked. He was beaten with the butt of a rifle that had been found in the apartment. He alleged that the 18-year-old had carried out the assault. As the sound of screams echoed around the apartment, neighbors ran to investigate. They found Javed lying on the floor covered in blood, and the younger of the boys with a head injury. Javed Iqbal could not lie his way out of this one. Enraged, the neighbors threw him out of the village. Javed was unconscious in hospital for roughly 3 weeks. The assault resulted in a broken jaw and fractured skull. He was arrested on suspicion of rape, but was later granted bail. Nobody in his family would pay for his medical treatment, and his aging mother was trying to care for him, as he couldn't even walk without help. Clinical psychologist Akhtar Ali would later say that this incident was the turning point. Javed, someone who had been aggressive his whole life, and was so accustomed to getting everything he wanted, had not been expecting aggression to be directed towards him. He was someone who was used to being in control. This attack was not something he was prepared to accept. In order to pay for his medical care, his assets were sold, something he was shocked to discover. His money continued to run out, and he moved to 16B Robbie Road. His mother died a few months later after a period of ill health, and Javad was set on revenge. I was so badly beaten that my head was crushed, my backbone broken, and I was left crippled. I hate this world. My mother cried for me. I want 100 mothers to cry for their children. I did it to avenge an attempt on my life by my boys, the death of my mother, and an injustice in society. In February of 1998, another complaint was made that he had raped 2 young boys at gunpoint. His wealth and status meant he escaped justice yet again. In May 1999, his depraved killing spree would begin. 100 runaway boys would disappear in just 147 days. After the success of my first murder, I decided my mission should begin. Javed Iqbal would later say that he had experimented with acids to find the best way of dissolving a body. He mixed 2 together and then murdered a boy before placing his body into the barrel of acid. Within 12 hours, the young boy's body had disintegrated. Friday, August 13th, murdered 3 boys today. They don't belong to their parents or anyone else. No one will miss them. Following his staggering confession, the police would spend the next few days talking to the families of the children who had gone missing. There were heartbreaking scenes as parents flocked to the police station to look at the photographs and clothing that had been found in the house, their worlds crashing down when they realized their son was amongst the dead. My victims were tricked into coming back to my apartment. When the bodies had dissolved, I poured the liquid down the toilet. My neighbor complained about the smell of the acid, and I decided to empty the barrels into a nearby river instead. No one suspects what I am doing. No one cares. Over the days that followed, 57 children had been identified from the photographs or clothes. A spokesperson for the police said, some of the children whose pictures or clothes were identified were among the city's poorest. Some were beggars, and others were among the army of children in Pakistan who work on the streets selling things. Others had left home and never returned. Based on evidence that had been found in the apartment, the police were able to identify more than 80 boys. On the February 18, 2000, Javed Iqbal was formally indicted. Murder charges were filed against him, a 17-year-old called Sajid and 2 minors. They all entered pleas of not guilty. As he was escorted into court for the proceedings, more than a dozen police officers were required to surround him and stop him from being killed by the crowds of outraged citizens. The prosecution had 105 witnesses, 73 of which were family members of the children. The court also heard from handwriting experts and the driver of the rickshaw that one of Javed's employees had paid for to take the acid-filled barrels to the river. Throughout the court proceedings, Javed Iqbal's story continued to morph and change. He would say that the children were alive, and that the clothes found in the apartment were all just second-hand ones that he had picked up. He would then later say he had committed the murders as an act of revenge for the injustice meted out to him. During the trial, Special Public Prosecutor Ashkur Rekari argued that Javed's written confession was not only a key and valid piece of evidence, but that there were witnesses who could corroborate its authenticity. People who had seen him with young boys who had later gone missing. The amount of clothes and shoes that had been found at the property that were then later confirmed to belong to the boys who had been reported missing provided yet more weight to their case. The prosecutor also highlighted the previous allegations that had been made against Javed, allegations of rape and sexual abuse, highlighting a very disturbing pattern of behavior. During the trial, the defense lawyer threatened to step back and no longer represent Javed after he had received a call from an anonymous source, warning him of the possible consequences of being his defense lawyer. The trial would last for 2 months, and outrage from the public would often come to the surface outside the courthouse, with people calling for Javed to be executed. The courtroom was packed as the verdicts were read out. The 2 minors were convicted and received prison sentences for their roles. 17-year-old Sajid was also convicted and sentenced to death. Javed Iqbal was convicted of 100 murders. He was given 100 death sentences. The judge said that Javed Iqbal would meet the same fate that he had subjected his victims to. He told the court, Javed Iqbal has been found guilty of 100 murders. The sentence is that he should be strangled 100 times. His body should be cut into 100 pieces and put in acid, as he did with his victims. He was to be strangled using the same chain he had used to murder his young victims. However, the country's interior minister, Moinuddin Haider, said that the sentence was not permitted. "We are signatories to the Human Rights Commission. Such punishments are not allowed." He said it would be taken to the High Court for a legal challenge. Javed Iqbal's lawyer also argued that the sentence was against Pakistan's constitution. The chief prosecutor supported the judge in this sentence, saying that Javed Iqbal was not a human, but a beast. His defense lawyer later confirmed he would appeal his sentence. His lawyer alleged that some of the children who were believed to have been murdered had returned home, and that the confession Javed had made was a false one, originating from detective stories. He then argued that the false confession was also the result of trying to raise awareness of boys going missing and get the government to pay attention to the issue, despite the fact his handwriting matched the cards that were found in his apartment and detailed the murders. He appealed against his death sentence at the Lahore High Court, and after several months the High Court transferred it to another court, saying it did not come within their jurisdiction. While sitting in prison, Javed Iqbal met with a Canadian psychiatrist, an author named Khaled Sohail. Javed told him, "Look here, in between my eyebrows you will see a sign. Most people have either a blank space or hair joining the eyebrows, but I have these 3 prongs. It is a star, a special sign from God." Tuesday, October 9, 2001, in Block 7 of the maximum security prison, Javed Iqbal was found dead in his cell. Found dead in another cell was Sajid. It was initially reported that they had taken their own lives by ingesting poison, but this version of events would later be challenged. It was alleged by a prisoner that Javed and Sajid had taken their own lives between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. The prisoner also alleged that the guard on duty had said, "I was asleep when the incident took place." The prisoner stated that when the guard had woken up, he had observed the 2 men hanging in their cells using bedsheets tied to the iron bars, and that they had been taken down, and then placed on the floor to look as though they were sleeping, before leaving the cell without telling anyone. When the guard was replaced, the new guard failed to check on the prisoners, and it wasn't until morning that the head warden found the pair dead in their cells, after he had gone to wake them up. It was reported that for the police investigators this story was odd. For 2 prisoners to take their lives in this way at the same time was unusual. In a bid to ascertain exactly what had happened, a magistrate, doctors, police and seniors from the prison descended on the scene. The bodies were taken away from the prison and sent to the city mortuary. According to the doctors, their necks were found to have strangulation marks on them, and blood had come out of their nostrils and mouths. On Javed Iqbal's body they found many wounds that had healed, wounds that had been inflicted with a blunt weapon, and they were found across his body. Despite the indications of another person or persons being involved in their deaths, were officially ruled as being suicides. Javat's lawyer Faisal Najib Chowdhury spoke to the BBC and said he was unconvinced by the official version of his client's death and was still waiting for the results of the post-mortem. One of the officials from the prison had called Javed Iqbal's behavior whilst in jail strange, adding that he had made more than 12 attempts to end his life. Following the deaths of the 2 inmates, 6 officials were suspended. Javat's family refused to collect his body from the mortuary, with his brothers saying the day he had made his confession was the day he had died to them. The story of the case would later be made into a film. It was announced in 2021 that Javed Iqbal, the untold story of a serial killer, would be coming out. The day before it was scheduled to be released, the Central Board of Film Censors pulled it from cinemas, citing objections to it from the public. However, many expressed their disappointment over the decision to pull the film. Following changes and edits, was announced it would be released in Pakistan on May 19, 2022. The impact of this case cannot be understated. It is a story that has captured and horrified people in equal measure for more than 20 years. The horror, brutality, and scale of it all lingering in the public consciousness. For the loved ones left behind, knowing the appalling deaths these boys were met with is crushing. Knowing that so many had gone missing and nobody had noticed. Knowing that there had been opportunities to catch and properly punish him for his crimes against children, but these had either been missed or had no impact are thoughts that are too awful to comprehend. There are now 100 families that are missing their sons, grandsons, brothers, nephews, and cousins. For many of these boys, hopes and dreams of a better life in the city were cruelly and brutally snatched away. Words almost seem futile when trying to wrap up a case like this. But the least one can do is think of these boys and their families and hope that such atrocities never, ever happen again. Story 5. Melbourne and Victoria, Australia. July 23, 2018. At 9 p.m., a 000 call came in from a 19-year-old at a house in Sunbury. Senior Constable Luke Calhoun was on shift at the Sunbury police station at the time and instantly recognized the voice on the end of the phone. "I think I killed someone," they said. "I didn't want to, but I did it. He came, he didn't seem scared. I strangled him. He's on my bed. It feels so good. I don't want to be a killer." "Have you actually done that?" he asked. "You never believe me. Why don't you believe me?" They bluntly and calmly replied. Authorities were dispatched immediately, and when they got to the home, it turned out that Constable Calhoun had been right about the voice. He had recognized it. The caller answered the door, and it was someone the station knew all too well. Jamie Lee Dollarguy. As they entered the home, they found 25-year-old Moreland Rothode in the bedroom. A cord attached to a sex toy was wrapped around his neck, and he was lying motionless. "See, I wasn't lying. You never believe me. Why won't you ever believe me? He's dead, isn't he?" Jamie shouted at the officers. Moreland was put into an ambulance and rushed off to hospital, and Jamie was taken down to the station for questioning. Given what she had revealed already, she was charged with attempted murder, intentionally causing serious injury and recklessly causing serious injury. What had happened and how it came to be was a frightening story. In the early evening of July 23, 2018, 19-year-old Jamie Lee Dollarguy logged onto the popular dating app used by millions worldwide, Plenty of Fish. Her bio read, borderline personality disorder and suicidal tendencies, into extreme fetishes, vampire fantasies, bondage, biting people, and being gang-raped against her will. She wasn't on it long. Before around 7 p.m., she got a message from a 25-year-old student, Moreland Rothode. They exchanged a total of 6 messages, sexual in nature, and about everything in Jamie's profile. He told her, "We'll do whatever you want." They made a plan to meet up at her house, with Jamie saying she would put on a costume and her favorite perfume. Moreland told her he would be there just after 8 p.m., and he would text when he was outside. With this, he closed the app and started getting ready. For years before this, Moreland Rothode had made the big move from Gujarat in western India to Australia on a student visa to get his master's in accounting. He had really started a whole new life and had settled in well at Charles Sturt University, also working part-time as a delivery driver. He was an only child and was very close to his parents, talking to them every day. They had even sold their bungalow to finance his move to Australia when they realized it was his dream. As soon as they had the money, Moreland was on his way, and the family took some photos at the airport before he left. Friends described him as happy-go-lucky, easygoing, but hard-working and very humble. His hard work had almost paid off, and was proud to say he was just 4 months away from finishing his course. His professors believed in him so much, they had actually offered him a job when he finished so he could stay in Australia permanently. Jamie was now at the station and talking a lot. She started by telling the detective she had been having a bad day, and the second Moreland agreed to meet her. Knew she was going to kill him. A matter of minutes after she ended her conversation with him on Plenty of Fish, she started making some Google searches. "I'm going to kill someone tonight for fun. How to kill someone. I want to commit murder. I'm going to kill someone tonight. Help." She then clicked on a link called 10 Steps for Committing a Murder and Get Away with It. At 8:07 p.m. Moreland arrived at the house. She told detectives she immediately took note of his shape and size, and felt he was weak enough that strangulation would be easy. She told him she wanted to role-play, and he was keen to learn. I told him that I wouldn't let him out of the house, and he said he didn't care. I said that I'm going to choke play, and he said he's happy to learn anything. So I said that I have like psychopathic tendencies in my head, and I'm not really that safe. And he said he's not scared, she said. Moreland said as long as she didn't hurt him, he was up for anything. Jamie told him he could just tap, and she would stop. He seemed to be thinking it's all a game, she told the officers. She got behind him and started choking him. Jamie said she had 2 personalities, one's mean, one's nice, they're both me. One is caring, and the other is destructive. I was hoping he would run away, call the police, she said. Just a few seconds later, he started to panic and tapped her. But instead of stopping as she'd promised, she only squeezed harder, wrapping her legs around his body to get a tighter grip. She whispered in his ear, "It'll be okay. It'll all be over." At this point, after attempting to wriggle out of her grip for several seconds, Moreland was now lying on his stomach and Jamie was sat on his back. He suddenly went limp and Jamie said she then tied the cord from the sex toy around his neck. "What was your intention?" the officer asked. "Murder," she replied. Just before calling the police, Jamie made some more searches online, looking for ways to be admitted into hospital. She told them she had had an urge to kill, comparing it to the feeling of someone who wants to smoke a cigarette. As she was talking more and more, the story was getting more disturbing as it went on, and the police then got a call. Moreland hadn't pulled through and had succumbed to his injuries just a few hours after getting to the hospital. A young Indian student has been killed after an online date went terribly wrong. Live now to Dean Felton. And Dean, take us through what happened here. Well, Mitch, the victim has been identified as Moreland Rothode, a 25-year-old accountant living here in Melbourne on a student visa. He died in Sunshine Hospital overnight after being found critically injured on Monday night. He'd gone to a house in Sunbury to visit a 19-year-old woman who lived alone at the address. The visit arranged through an internet dating site. The woman's home was a supported residential service, visited frequently by carers. Neighbors told me this afternoon that police too were frequent visitors to the address to quell noisy and sometimes violent disturbances there. And not surprisingly, Moreland's friends are in deep shock at the sudden and violent death of this young man. He was very humble personality, very jolly in nature. He used to crack jokes and he loved to play cricket. And the woman in custody over the attack on Moreland, she's expected to have her charges upgraded to either manslaughter or murder. After this, Jamie Dollarguy's charges would swiftly be upgraded to murder. What she had done, although shocking, was not actually surprising to those that knew her. Some carers who had worked with her even described her as a shape-shifting demon girl. Jamie had lived in state care since she was 10 years old, with frequent visits from social workers and her criminal records starting when she was young. She often spent long periods in juvenile detention. In the years before she turned 18, Jamie had carers living with her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, in a house owned by the Department of Health and Human Services. They said they were terrified of her and her unpredictability. But when she turned 18, however, they all stepped away and she was living alone and unsupervised. As soon as they left, neighbors said the police were there for a lot of various reasons, including noise disturbances, fighting, and welfare checks. She would often bring them cakes and cards after their visits to thank them, and they had grown to know her fairly well. She was a massive social media user and would upload numerous times a day. Sometimes the pictures were simply her playing around with filters and sharing her artwork. And sometimes they were lengthy paragraphs about her childhood trauma, sexual abuse, and the issues she had with her body. She said she hated skinny pretty girls and wanted to torture them. She would self-harm and put batteries into her body, resulting in her having more than 100 operations to remove foreign bodies. One of her friends said she claimed to have a demon inside her and sometimes believed that she was a wolf. One moment she appeared happy and was smiling. The next she was going ballistic, snarling and growling like a wolf and biting people. It is one of the scariest things I have ever seen. It's like she was possessed, someone said. She posted to Facebook just a few weeks before the murder of Moreland and said, "If only they believed me when I said I'm not sane. I live in fear, afraid of what's behind the corner. My heart is black. I no longer feel the emotions of happiness unless I see someone else suffer." And on the afternoon she did kill him, she texted one of her carers and said, upon being charged with murder, everybody knew that it would be a complicated case. As a result, she was assessed by some of the best clinical minds in Australia, and they said she was one of the most psychologically damaged they'd ever assessed. There is no doubt that Jamie Dollarguy was a profoundly troubled person, and everybody said she was a ticking time bomb. Despite all of her confessions and admissions, in her first court appearance, she entered a plea of not guilty. As prosecutors dived further into the case, Moreland's friends in Australia banded together to raise money to send him back to India to be with his family. It took him 12 days to get home, where he was cremated. A year would then pass as more interviews, assessments, and the like were carried out, establishing whether or not Jamie was fit to stand trial. It was deemed that she was, and the now 20-year-old's murder trial would begin at the end of 2019. Moreland's parents said although they wanted to be there for their son, they simply couldn't afford to fly over, so they had to wait by the phone every day for any update. The loss had left them unable to eat or sleep, and not being able to get to Australia had only added to their pain. In terms of Jamie's mental health and past issues, it was set to be a complex trial. There was no denying that she had killed Moreland. She had already confessed to that. But it was now an argument of whether her mental health issues affected her in that moment, and whether or not the murderous intent could be proven. As a result, her lawyers were pushing for a conviction of manslaughter. Her defense team called in a psychologist, Dr. Carroll, and he told the jury that he did not believe that Jamie suffered from psychosis in any way. He said that she knew what she had done was wrong, and that she was aware of what she was doing. He said she was in a state of turmoil, but had a residual awareness that choking Moreland would actually kill him. Jamie's lawyer Sharon Lacey focused heavily on her childhood. She spoke about her past abuse, living in care and suicidal thoughts and tendencies. They said that her borderline personality disorder had played a role, and Jamie was suffering from stunted psychological development brought on by the trauma of her childhood. Jamie sat quietly in the courtroom the whole time, not looking up and not paying attention, sometimes smiling, but mainly focusing her attention on the children's coloring book she was drawing in and making origami. Sharon said her client was so damaged that no jury could be sure of her having murderous intent, and therefore they could not find her guilty of murder. There's no evidence to suggest she intended to hurt him, she said. But the prosecution said that while it was clear there was some significant trauma in her life, as well as severe mental health issues, she admitted to the police that she knew before he even arrived at the house that she was going to kill him. As soon as she got that first text, she had in mind to harm this man, they said. And when Moreland got to the house, Jamie admitted to sizing him up, assessing how easy it would be to kill him, and her own description of how it all played out showed that Jamie was someone who wanted to do this, someone who was very much present in the moment, and understood exactly what the implications were. It was absolutely premeditated, they said. After an 18-day trial, where numerous witnesses, including Jamie's carers and clinical experts, and the tape of her lengthy police interview was shown, it was now up to the jury to make the final call. A Sunbury woman who choked an Indian University student to death only hours after meeting him on a dating app has been acquitted of murder. Jamali Dalagai admitted she felt good after strangling her victim, but a jury found she did not intend to kill him. Hours before, Jamali Dalagai lured her prey into her bedroom. The woman, who once believed she was a werewolf, searched online, 10 steps to commit a murder and get away with it. And today, a unanimous jury found Dalagai not guilty of the crime, but guilty of the alternative charge of manslaughter. Prosecutors say the Sunbury woman targeted Moreland Rothode on a dating app to act out her sadistic tendencies. She deliberately strangled him, ignored his tapping, the panic symbol, until he became a dead weight. The Sunbury woman has a severe personality disorder caused by a childhood of appalling abuse and neglect. The condition means she has a limited capacity to feel remorse for killing Mr. Rothode. Afterwards, the killer told detectives, Dalagai's defense team argued she didn't intend to kill the Indian student, and in fact she wanted the victim to stop her. During the trial, Dalagai smiled to herself as she drew pictures using colored pencils. Today, however, she simply stared at the floor. Her lawyers say they need until April next year to compile all of her psychiatric reports. Eliza Rugg, 9 News. Jamie Dalagai was acquitted of murder and instead found guilty of the lesser charge of manslaughter. Safe to say this decision left a lot of people shocked and bewildered. Some sources say that if everything about her dark past and violent tendencies had been told to the jury, maybe the outcome would have been different. But it is hard to tell. The carers that spent even a short period with her argued she should never be released, and is far too dangerous. The judge said to Jamie, and although manslaughter carries a maximum of 20 years in Victoria, Jamie Little-Agwee was sentenced to 9 years in prison, with a minimum term of 5 years and 6 months. But she had already served just over 2 years, so she could actually be out in just over 3 years. Jamie Little-Agwee still has homicidal urges, and she has threatened to kill another inmate. For now, she remains locked up in maximum security, but she could be freed on parole in just over 3 years. In the court's paperwork, it said that an attribute of her personality was a limited capacity for empathy and capacity to feel remorse. Remorse may serve as an indicator of the likelihood of a person reoffending. A person who is truly and deeply remorseful for their actions is less likely to repeat them. In your case, due to your empathy deficit, I am not convinced that the amount of remorse you feel is likely to significantly inhibit future conduct. Nevertheless, I accept that you do feel remorse to the extent that you are able to. It follows that you must be given the benefit of remorse in mitigation of your sentence. Moreland's parents were horrified that people were aware she was so high risk, and even the social workers were scared of being on their own with her. And yet she was still allowed to live alone, with people coming and going as they pleased. And to top it all off, she could be back out in just a few years. It is hard to know what will happen after these few years in Prisoner Up for Jamie Dollar Guy, and how this situation will be approached and handled. This was an unsettling, disturbing, and very upsetting case to look into in many ways. And we're interested to hear your thoughts about it. One thing we know for sure is that Moreland Rothode lost his life in a terrifying way with someone he had put trust into, and his last few moments realizing what was actually happening to him is unthinkable. His father said, "We are now lonely in our old age. We miss him, but we've accepted the truth. Our son won't come back, but he will remain in our memory and our hearts forever."